Hello everybody, it's Gary, and today I wanted to do a video that is not typical to my normal formula of rankings, and it is where I rank my least favorite episode of each season from best to worst. Basically, if you have not seen my least favorite to favorite SpongeBob episodes for each season, you would already know the contenders for this list, but now I am ranking them from best to worst, meaning that just because one episode is at the top of the list does not mean I like the episode. It just means that it is better than what comes down the line. So, with all this information out of the way, let's get started with number 12.
Boo! You stink!
At number 12, the best of all the worst episodes is Season 1's Valentine's Day. This is the first episode where Patrick is a jerk before it was the normal status quo. Patrick in this episode is just heavily unlikable, and some might argue that was because SpongeBob didn't give him anything, but for early season Patrick, he could have been more patient. Adding on to this is the fact that the ending was pretty annoying to me because of how arrogant Patrick was acting, and after all this, he just gave SpongeBob a rock heart, while SpongeBob put all this work into giving him this gift, even when Patrick was a big jerk throughout this. So why is this the lowest of all the episodes? Well, compared to future episodes, Patrick is not brute and rude, and you can kind of see his actions in this episode. And also, I did like the beginning with SpongeBob spreading joy, and also, this is not as good as the rest of season 1, as I found this season to have the least bad episodes, if that makes any sense. Even so, Patrick's actions in this episode has led me to put this as my least favorite of the season.
Boo! You stink!
At number 11, we have Season 3's The Sponge Who Could Fly, aka the Lost episode. If I'm going to be honest, the specials in Season 3 were probably the worst, even if we are including Seasons 5 through 12. They were all not that good, and this one is the worst of all of them for Season 3. The patchy segments are the only reason why this episode is so low on the list, and the actual episode itself was just cruel. The way the townspeople treat SpongeBob in this episode is the worst, as they go from thinking he's a fool for trying to believe in himself and should give up, to using him for their own personal needs, which leads him to be worked to death. There is so much wrong with this plot. For one, this is a SpongeBob torture episode, no doubt about it, and the townspeople are such scumbags, and so are SpongeBob's friends. Seeing this episode is sad because SpongeBob originally just wanted to live among the jellyfish, and now he just did all the chores for people. Keep in mind, these people mocked him and were just bringing him down for his dreams and tried to kill him for that. Why are these people so terrible? This is why this episode is so bad. The people are so annoying, and besides, the rest of the episode is a snooze fest, except the patchy segment, which was barely there, so this is definitely the worst episode of this season.
Boo! You stink!
At number 10, we have Housewarming. Housewarming is an obvious ripoff of an actual good episode, Jellyfish Jam. The plot that a worm moves into SpongeBob's house and then invites a bunch of other worms, and they all live in SpongeBob's body as he tries to get rid of them. My problem with this episode is how poorly they handle it, and it just feels like Jellyfish Jam, but with gross imagery. Yeah, one thing I should have mentioned is the fact that this episode's imagery is very grotesque. Other than that, the plot is extremely boring, and the worms were extremely annoying, and the way SpongeBob was constantly being tortured by the worms or living in him is just another bad thing. Again, not much else to say. Moving on.
Boo! You stink!
At number 9, we have Season 2's Dumped. This episode is just sad and definitely one of the worst episodes Gary has been in. Let's get this out of the way by saying that this is my least favorite episode from Seasons 1 to 3 as seen before. The reason for this is because two things. Patrick and Gary are extremely unlikable in this episode, and SpongeBob is very depressing in this episode. A lot of people would put an episode like I'm With Stupid on here, but what makes me put this above that is Patrick is more unlikable here, and in this episode is a lot sadder, whereas the other is a lot more dumber. The plot is that Gary starts to like Patrick more than SpongeBob and chooses him over SpongeBob because Patrick had a cookie in his pocket. Once Gary chooses Patrick, Patrick becomes heavily unlikable in this episode, always rubbing it in SpongeBob's face that he has Gary, and yet he still comes to his house and asks for stuff. Gary isn't much better because SpongeBob has done so much for him, and now he just rejects him until the end, where he just wanted Patrick's cookie. The other part which makes this hard to watch is how SpongeBob is constantly depressed, which makes it worse when you realize how much he cares for Gary, and for him to be rejected is just saddening. Dumped is a very bad episode, and if you are going to rewatch the originals, don't let this one betray, as it is a bad apple of the bunch.
Boo! You stink!
At number 8, we have Season 12's The Nitwiting. Season 12's episodes, in my opinion, were not that bad, but this one definitely is the worst out of all of them. This episode is very stupid. It attempts to be funny, but it does not work, and the humor is awful. It is basically stupid humor, but without the humor. This episode sticks out like a sore thumb when it comes out to Season 12 bads, as most of them are barely bad or just average squid torture, whilst this one is different. Basically, what happens is SpongeBob joins Patrick's Stupid People Club, and they destroy the town for about most of the episode. So you might be asking yourself, Gary, why do you hate this episode so much? Like I said, the humor is just stupid humor, except you take the humor out of it, so it's just stupid. Not much else to say about this one, so let's just move on.
Boo! You stink!
At number 7, we have Season 5's To Love a Patty. This episode is hands down one of the weirdest episodes in the entire show. SpongeBob falls in love with an edible sandwich, which is probably one of the worst plots to an episode, and it is a terrible plot in this episode. SpongeBob's obsession with this Krabby Patty is creepy, and honestly, why is it even allowed in a kid's show? Keep in mind, this is only number 7, and we still have 6 more, so let's fasten our seatbelts and get ready to ride. In this episode, SpongeBob ends up dating a patty to the point where it ends up molding, and the close-up of the patty and the end looking worse than the patty from Nasty Patty, which is a crowning achievement. Not to mention the fact that he could have possibly killed Junior in the episode where he was fighting tiny clams, and in the end where he eats the patty after doing all those things, and it molding for a long time makes this episode even more disgusting. Overall, this is definitely Season 5's worst, and it only goes downhill from here.
Boo! You stink!
At number 6, we have Season 4's Good Neighbors. This is one of the most infamous episodes of SpongeBob, and for good reason. While I do not agree that this is where SpongeBob dropped the shark, this is the first squid torture that really boils your blood. This isn't the last squid torture, by the way, there's still more to come, but on topic, this episode is basically Squidward trying to enjoy his day off from work, and SpongeBob and Patrick ruin it by constantly doing things to him that he clearly does not enjoy. Wow, this certainly does not sound like a plot that will be overused in the slightest. Yes, another issue I have with this episode is the influence it will have on future overused plot of Squidward being tortured for no reason, but a half-assed attempt at comedy, which is really bad. This episode was truly the first of its kind, and it is the worst plot for SpongeBob and constantly being overused. This is only the first half too. The second half is also extremely bad. For some reason, Squidward's security system turns on him instead of SpongeBob and Patrick, because of course it does. This episode may not be where SpongeBob becomes completely bad, but is definitely where the plots become worse.
Boo! You stink!
At number 5, we have Season 6's Cephalopod Lodge. This is one of the worst squid torture episodes to date, and it somehow isn't even top 10 worst episodes. Stay tuned for that. What sets this apart from the run-of-the-mill basic squid torture, you may ask? Well, in the beginning, Squidward is actually happy for once, and for some reason SpongeBob wants to know why. Sorry for my profound language, but what the fuck? Why do you care so much about this? Let the dude be happy for once. You always ruin his day, and now you want to ruin something that actually makes him happy. Squidward ends up being in a lodge in which SpongeBob and Patrick end up getting in, despite there being a door guard. But hey, whatever we can to ruin Squidward's life for no reason, am I right? So after Squidward basically gets kicked out because SpongeBob and Patrick have to ruin everything he likes, and it doesn't stop there because now SpongeBob and Patrick think that Squidward wants to join them and ends up stinging his tongue with a jellyfish as if Squidward wasn't tormented enough, and then SpongeBob and Patrick tried to help him in the end but end up screwing it up again. The ending, though, is one of the worst endings of SpongeBob history, which is surprising, and yet we're somehow only on number 5.
Boo! You stink!
At number 4, we have Season 9's Little Yellow Book. Season 9 has 3 episodes that people always seem to go back and forth on which is the worst of the season, which are Squid Baby, SpongeBob You're Fired, and this. For me, this is the worst of the season. Why, you may ask? Well, the reason for this is because almost no character is likable here, and the character that is likable is constantly being laughed at and beaten down by everyone else. The plot is that Squidward reads SpongeBob's diary, and the entire town, including his best friend, laughs at him. Yeah, let's get through with everything wrong here. First, Squidward is awful here, and even after all the punishment he went through after he reads SpongeBob's diary, he still reads it. The townspeople here are also even worse, though, because they go along and laugh with Squidward and they realize it was SpongeBob's diary. They completely turn on Squidward and make his life a living hell despite them doing the same thing, which is extremely hypocritical. The worst, however, is Patrick. Patrick makes fun of SpongeBob right in front of him and then goes along with the townspeople to clown on Squidward, except he's even harsher. Yeah, well, SpongeBob You're Fired was incredibly boring and Squid Baby was terrible. Squid torture this episode is just the most pain to sit through, and there is no denying that.
Boo! You stink!
At number 3, we have Season 11's Ink Lemonade. Ink Lemonade is a disgusting episode that is also a Squidward torture, and it clearly sticks out among Season 11, and everyone agrees that this is the worst for Season 11. For one, Patrick sells Squidward's ink, a body fluid he has, which is really disgusting. The entire episode is disgusting. In the beginning, some guy drinks Patrick's moldy lemonade with his bandage, which he rips off in a very grotesque scene. Next, Patrick psychologically tortures Squidward on purpose, which is really disgusting, and when you realize it's on purpose, it makes it even worse, and he is shown to be a genius here. Patrick does this because he makes money off this, despite Squidward doing all the work, and when Squidward tries to sell it, nobody wants it because, of course. The end, however, is the worst ending ever. Why does Squidward have to eat spider eggs and then spiders come out of his throat? It is so disgusting, and the animation, which is more polished, makes it look even worse.
Boo! You stink!
At number 2, we have Season 8's Pet Sitter Pat. This episode is the first one on the list where you feel like you want to punch the screen. This episode, for one, rips off a pal for Gary. Yes, a pal for Gary, which is sad. This episode is a Gary torture, which is probably the worst character for torture because he's just a pet and nothing else. SpongeBob goes away for a bit, so he lets Patrick be in charge of Gary. Yeah, we already know this is going to be bad when it involves Patrick in charge, let alone in charge of a pet. So how does Patrick treat Gary? He constantly beats him up. First, he starves him, and you can see the genuine pain in Gary's face, which makes it even worse. And then he threatens Gary with a flamethrower because he did not want to take a bath. This episode is just Gary being beat up again and again by Patrick, and nobody would enjoy this. Why is this an episode? It is so lazy with the writing, and the writers think that Gary being beat up is the funniest thing in the world, as it is what the entire plot involves around. Why would people find this enjoyable, though? The only good thing about this episode is the fact SpongeBob only gives a crap about Gary, which does not excuse the fact how Gary got beat up by Patrick, and he does nothing to get anything for his wrongdoings. So how could an episode possibly be worse than this? Well, here we go.
Boo! You stink!
At number 1, we have a Season 7's A Pal for Gary. First of all, who was surprised at Season 7? This season has the worst episodes in the show, so why A Pal for Gary as number 1? My least favorite episode in the entire show, above all the crap in this season. It is an episode that tortures Gary, and unlike last time, SpongeBob does not seem to give two craps about Gary. What happens is that SpongeBob brings home a new pet because he thinks Gary needs a new friend, and that pet ends up being a monster which wants to kill Gary. Yes, you heard me, right? The plot is that Gary tries not to die because he is being chased by a monster pet. This is a terrible, terrible plot, and the monster, which is called Puffy Fluffy, is not the worst thing in this episode. No, the worst thing in this episode is SpongeBob, as he is unaware that his own pet is dying. This episode also has the second worst scene in the entire show after the scene we do not talk about in One Course Meal. The scene is where SpongeBob tells Gary to put Puffy Fluffy down while Gary is about to die. Whenever SpongeBob is about to die and Gary saves SpongeBob, he still gets mad at him for saving his ass. This episode is so much wrong with it, and in the end, Gary gets nothing but shit on.